This is the second video for ConnextCMS. It covers the file system deep dive. The first video was largely a non-technical overview of how ConnextCMS appears in the browser and generally works. This video is going to cover the file systems in more detail. So let's get started. The place to start is with KeystoneJS because ConnextCMS runs on top of KeystoneJS. So let's start there. The best place to get started learning about the ins and outs of KeystoneJS is on their documentation page, keystonejs.com docs. And it's split into three main categories: getting started, configuration, and database. Be sure to read through all this information if you want to be a guru with this software. I'm going to cover it briefly and quickly, but the technical detail you really need to know is here. KeystoneJS is an Express application, and so they follow the Express framework and file layout. So the main files that you're going to want to take a look at is the keystone.js file, and then the routes directory, the templates directory, and the models directory. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is a basic file directory here of what the myCMS directory. So let me back up a step and show you. When you clone the demo droplet, you will open it up on the command line, and you'll see directories like this. There won't be a temp directory, but there will be a nodes modules directory, and this is where the node dependencies get installed. There's a Keystone 4 directory, and that's where the Keystone files are installed. There's the ConnextCMS directory, and that's the ConnextCMS repository that is just a clone from the GitHub repository. In the ConnextCMS directory, there are two bash script files. There's the copy keystone and there's the merge ConnextCMS keystone file. So what happens is when you run copy keystone, it's going to copy the Keystone 4 directory into the myCMS directory. And then you'll run the merge, and that will merge all the ConnextCMS files into Keystone 4 files. And so that's how you merge Keystone and ConnextCMS into a working program. So let's go into myCMS, because that's where the actual software lives and runs. So you see there's a KeystoneJS file, and this is your setup. There's public directory, there's routes, there's templates, and there's models. There's also updates, but we're not going to worry about that. And then the package JSON is a node program, or defines the dependencies for the node program. So here it is in brackets. It's a little easier to look at the code here than it is on the command line. So the way Express works is it sets up a router. So when an HTTP request comes into the server, Node's going to pick it up, and it's going to look at the router index file to figure out how to route this request. And so this is where the static files, or the home page with just a slash. This is how an Express app knows where to look for the data that's being requested. This paragraph here comes with the default Keystone installation. All of this stuff here is for the API routing that is used in ConnextCMS to allow the front end to talk with the KeystoneJS running on the server. So I'll cover that more in a minute, but the important concept here is that Node starts with this router file, with this index file. And then, depending on whether it's an API or a view, it's going to look in one of these directories. And so let's just stick with the front end and the home page for now. So it's going to go to this index.js if there's a request for the home page, and it's going to tell it render the index view. So that's where the templates directory comes in. So now it hits on over to the template views, and it knows to load this index.hbs file, and this is the actual HTML that controls the home page. Now, you'll notice that these files end in .hbs and not .html. HBS stands for handlebars, which is a scripting template. Out of the box, Keystone likes to use Jade, but ConnextCMS uses handlebars because you don't need to know anything about handlebars in order to use it. You can just copy and paste HTML in here and it will work. So that's very important. So all the files on the front end use handlebars. So now that our home page has been loaded, there is also the models directory. Now the models define the, how do I put this? Basically the data that's used in KeystoneJS to create the user experience comes from the models. So every blog post has a post model, and you'll see here that it's largely a key value pair that tell Keystone how to interact with the database, what type of data is going to come through, and how it should look. So then there's categories for each of the blog posts. There's a model for users, and then the ConnextCMS stuff. We have a page model. We have page section models. This gallery, this is for the Cloudinary image hosting. The image uploads is for the ConnextCMS image library. So the Keystone image stuff and the ConnextCMS image stuff exist side by side, so it's important to know which is which. Here's our file uploads model. This tells KeystoneJS how to handle a file that's uploaded. So this is good stuff. So those three main concepts of the routes and the templates and the models, that comes from Express, and that's really important core idea to wrap your head around it. An HTTP request comes through and it gets sent to the router. The router tells it where to go and how to handle it, which usually ends up loading a template, and then the template retrieves its data from the database, and that data is defined by a model. So that's Express and Keystone kind of in a nutshell. I didn't really spend much time on this KeystoneJS file. This is sort of sets everything up. It tells Keystone which port to use. It tells it what its name is. It tells it the name of the database. So this is also good to know. And all this information that I've just covered, like I said, is covered more in depth in the KeystoneJS.com docs page. Okay, so where do we go from there? If you want to get down and dirty with ConnextCMS and edit the front page, here's how you do it. Again, the home page is largely controlled in the templates, views, index HBS file. This is the actual HTML that gets displayed on the home page. There is also the public directory, which loads all of your static assets. So like all your JavaScript files get placed in the JS folder, your images go into the image folder, fonts go in the font folder. So very similar to any vanilla, like Apache type of web server. And the other thing to keep in mind is that let's take a look at the demo here. So you'll notice like all of this HTML is covered in the index.hbs file. Now this menu, this is defined in the templates, views, layouts, default HBS. This is sort of all of these HBS files in the views directory sort of get wrapped inside of this default HBS file. And let's see if I can even show you that body right here. So all that data gets inserted right there where the body tag is, and this HTML here creates the menu, and then this JavaScript down here creates the dynamic loading of the navigation menu items. So if you want to mess with this and put in your own static navigation items, or you're not happy with how the navigation menu functions, this is the place to go to change that functionality. Okay, so We've covered the index.hbs file. We've covered the public directory, the default HBS. Now, it's important to keep in mind also that this is a CMS, so these pages here, these don't exist in an actual static file. They exist in the back end. They live in the database. They're created by you. And so this is the place to go to edit that information. And so that's that. So that pretty much handles every aspect of the front end in terms of dealing with that. So let's talk, oh, and then there's also the debugging and development in the browser. So let's cover that last little element. So as I showed in the first video, I'm not sure why the images aren't showing up right now, but let's just go to the home page. In order to debug this, you can, I'm using Chrome. Firefox has very similar settings, but if you want to do your development and debugging, if you're not familiar with it yet, go to the hamburger up here, and then more tools and developer tools. Again, this is Chrome browser. If you go to sources, you can browse the all of your JavaScript files in your website. You know what? I'm not sure why some of these aren't showing up. Let's do that in here. There we go. So all of your source files are here. You can put debug statements and then open the page, and it'll go to that page. If you have errors, they'll show up here. So this is the place to go to actually edit and debug your website in the browser. So let's talk a little bit now about the back end. So ConnextCMS is a backbone and require application, and following the standards for backbone or the layout, it uses views and models, and those are the two main, if you're new to backbone, these are the two main concepts to understand, is views and models. And then collections are really just a collection of models, so they have a lot of the, you know, these three concepts are really critical, but it's not very hard to, you know, if you think of like a jar that contains models, like that's a collection. And so read through this stuff on backbonejs.org, or go to connectcms.com. This link right here, Developing Backbone.js Applications, this is a wonderful resource. It's an open source book put out by O'Reilly. All the information is freely available. And right here under Backbone Basics, this is the chapter to read, especially the sub-chapters on models and views and collections. This is pretty much all the information that you're going to need right here. So the way that looks in the actual file system is that all of, so when I say backend, just to be clear, I'm talking about this backend right here, what you see right here. I'll take a step backwards in a minute and talk about the Keystone backend, which is what you see here, which is what you see when you first log in by default, although this might get changed in the future. It might take you directly to the ConnextCMS dashboard. So let's talk about this backend here. This is the backbone application that is written in, that also uses require. And it lives in the public directory and the JavaScript, the JS directory under app. And this is pretty standard for creating a front-end single-page app, is to use this nomenclature. So what's going to happen first is the actual page that gets loaded lives in the templates, views, dashboard.hbs file. This is the file that KeystoneJS actually loads when you request the ConnextCMS backend. It calls some font files and other CSS files, and then here is the call to require.js, and then require.js loads just this one JS file and, well, I guess 2 JS files. And so these are the main files. So this is what happens with require.js is it makes just a couple calls, and then require.js figures out what files need to be appended so that it loads it all at once and makes sure all the dependencies are loaded correctly. So let's look at these files. If you go to the public directory, JS, you can look at this main dashboard, and actually maybe we should start with this CMS common.js. So these are the 2 main files, the CMS common.js and this main dashboard. So the CMS_common.js file loads all of the libraries. So here's where jQuery and Bootstrap and the admin LTE control panel, the Cayman library controls image resizing, canvas to blob will convert HTML5 canvases to a blob, which is like a file for file handling purposes. This is where the tiny MCE editor gets loaded, and the date picker, which is the little calendar widget that lets you set the publish date. And this is a good example of the require.js format. So we're loading Bootstrap, and it depends on jQuery. And here we're loading admin LTE, and that depends on Bootstrap and jQuery. We're exporting logs, which is a little library function that I wrote, and it doesn't depend on anything. It stands on its own. So this is how require.js defines the dependencies, and that's a really neat behind-the-scenes critical function that require.js performs. So after it loads the libraries, it calls the main dashboard app.js, and this is like the parent JavaScript file that controls everything. So again, here is our require.js header, and you can see it's loading all the backbone models, all the backbone views, and each file gets assigned to a JavaScript object. And then down here, this is the main functions that load and run. So again, we're talking about this page here, the slash dashboard. And what you'll see here is now all of the views and models and collections are getting created. So for instance, pages view and posts view, those correspond to this view, that's the pages view, and this view, this is the posts view. And so every sort of user interface page here has its own view defined. And you'll see that that's where these get loaded. Now, the actual code that runs, these are just calls that create the object and get it up there. And let me show you the dashboard HBS file. So this is where the HTML for that page lives. And what you'll notice is a whole bunch of divs that are of class container. This is a Bootstrap class. And each one of these divs corresponds to a view. So it gets loaded in HTML as just an empty div. And then when main dashboard gets called, it loads the actual object that controls that view, and then the actual view code lives in the views directory. So if we look at the dashboard, so again, this is a good example of Backbone and require.js. Here are the require.js calls. So this view depends on these files, and each of those files gets loaded first and then gets assigned to a JavaScript object. And then this is a default template that the Backbone framework uses. So we're going to tell it, okay, you're assigned to a div, and specifically you're assigned to this element that we created for you called dashboard view. So if you look back at the dashboard HBS file, you'll find a div that has an ID of dashboard view. And then it's going to load the template file, which it comes out of this object here, which came out of this template file here. And those templates live in the templates directory. So here is the dashboard.html template. So this is the actual HTML that lives. Let's go back to the dashboard. Right here, this subsection here of the page is the dashboard template. And so here's the HTML template that gets loaded into the view. There's events. This again, everything I'm walking through here is a standard Backbone layout, and we don't have any events going on. This initialize function gets called when it gets initialized. Render is how the actual is what happens when the actual template file gets rendered onto the page. It also executes this code here. And then after those are all pretty much default settings, and then past that there would be other function calls, like if we go to the pages add new view, you can see all the same default function calls. Here we actually do have some events, and we say when this event happens, execute the submit page function. And we define that, oops, by with this syntax. We just create, this is just an object within the view function, and we create a new function, and we put all of our code inside of this function. So they can get quite lengthy, but this is how you assign functions and variables to a view. So again, read up on the Backbone.js if you're not familiar with this, but this is how Backbone.js is implemented in ConnextCMS, as well as Require.js. I think I've covered that pretty well. So that is how you control the back end of ConnextCMS. So let's go back and talk about the back end of KeystoneJS. KeystoneJS also has their own back end, which is here, which is what you'll see when you log in. And then you can get to the ConnextCMS dashboard by clicking on this link that exists on all the pages. And again, this functionality might change, but this is how it is right now. So this is the KeystoneJS backend, and these are the various Keystone models which I talked about that live in this models directory. So every model in here is going to have a link that appears here in the main backend. So all these models with the nice titles, these are what come with KeystoneJS out of the box. Everything under the other is what was created specifically for ConnextCMS. Ignore these front-end widgets. This is going to go away. That was an early experiment. So if you go to, say, a pages model, that's weird. Okay, might be having technical difficulty. Anyways, if you go there, you'll see basically a form, and that form will correspond to all of these key value pairs, and you'll be able to edit those directly. And this is it's nice having access to the Keystone backend, because if something gets messed up over here on this backend, like a model doesn't get properly deleted, or I don't know, you're editing this part of it and it malfunctions, you can always access it from the Keystone backend. So that's why it's nice having these alternative backends. But that backend, that Keystone backend, is controlled. I'm going to have to go here and show you the node modules. So that Keystone backend actually lives in the Keystone directory under the node modules. That's new. Let me load a different instance. I did some modifications that are messing with this. Here we go. Okay, so node modules, Keystone. So this is where the files for this live, and this is where the documentation gets a little sketchy on the Keystone side. I believe most of those files that control that are written in React, and that's what's largely being changed at the moment. And I believe most of the actual files that control what you see in the browser live in this node modules Keystone admin directory. And I just want you to be aware that this is where it lives, and this is where you access it. And if you want to get this deep, you're going to need to know the ins and outs of the Keystone backend and the and React.js, which is what they're converting to. And but this is where you go. This is how you access it. Like I said, the documentation isn't very thorough at this point, but if this is where you want to go, go for it. I won't cover it in any more detail from here. I just want to point out that this is where it lives and that's how you access it. Okay, so this has been the file system deep dive. I've covered the KeystoneJS, both the front end and the back end that it controls. I've covered ConnextCMS, both the front end and the back end it controls, where all the files live, how to access them, how to customize the CMS for your own needs. So hopefully you have what you need. If you don't, please go to the Google groups and raise a flag, ask a question. And if you see other people out there asking questions, please answer them. The support forum is mimics the very same support forum that KeystoneJS uses. It's community support, so it depends on people participating in the community. And the more people who do, the better it is, and everybody benefits. So go forth and have fun.